Morning glory and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. It's Friday. That means we are lucky when Ben Domenech joins us. He is host of the Big Ben podcast. He's editor-at-large for The Spectator, Fox News contributor, friend of the program. Ben, I have all 7 grandkids here, so I didn't listen to Big Ben this week. I have no idea what you talked about, but you tell me if I know, but I'm going to get to Sydney Sweeney. I'm betting you talked about Sydney Sweeney. Am I right?
Yes, you are correct.
Yeah, so we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. Sweeney. I talked about John Brennan. I talked about Fantastic Four, and I talked about the Steele dossier, and I talked about the Terry McLaurin contract situation, which was very perturbed.
Did you talk about Emmanuel Clase and the betting scandal in Cleveland yet?
I have not talked about that yet, but I do find it somewhat amusing.
Oh, it's terrible. And the terrible thing is he's a great young kid, and he's going to be banned for life if he's involved in this. But let me begin with something you didn't talk about because it happened this morning. Jon Stewart took to the airwaves, cut number 9.
Again, this is them trying to police and create rules that they would never follow. The idea that by having what may be a more left-leaning or progressive bent or just bringing in, that's how Fox is popular. That's how any of these people, they all talk about Gutfeld's the most popular. Yet he's not popular because he's a both sides guy. He's not, a fair use like, the fairness doctrine says. Like, he's relentless. And, after a day of watching Fox News and being bathed in their very purposeful propaganda, it's a great way to top off the night. But it's not the Jay Leno, like, I don't understand. I mean, why you want to offend your audience? Why not just do a show about, why do you have to talk about things you believe? Why do you have to make jokes about things you actually think? And I just say, I'm just going to go throw myself down.
So, Ben, what I wrote about this is what's worse, that Jon Stewart believes this nonsense and is this dumb or jealous, or both, or that he doesn't and is doing fan service. To repeat, Jon Stewart without a writer's room and even with one is not very funny, and he certainly isn't an informed or a serious intellect. He's a mediocre comedian who dominated for a few years when there was limited competition in his space. Now it's crowded and he's failing, and he's still not very funny. He's always welcome to come on this show and discuss the world with me. Courtesy is a prerequisite for me. Perhaps he could surprise, but doubtful. Key thing to know, Gutfeld is smart and very funny. That is why he succeeds. Your take on Jon Stewart.
So, it's interesting. I had conversations about Jon Stewart with my late father-in-law and with the late, great Don Rumsfeld about why they repeatedly did his show. And one of the reasons that they both cited to me was that he was a guy who self-staffed, who did his own research, that he was someone who actually read the books in question or the documents in question, the articles in question, and that he was prepared when he came to the interview. And I think you can actually see that. If you go back, you can watch, I don't know if Comedy Central has eliminated it from their website. Unfortunately, they've cut back on a lot of things. But there's an old interview with Rumsfeld where it's about a 30-minute extended version of it, where they're talking about Iraq. And it's actually an informed discussion. It's something where you feel like, Stewart is coming to it as someone who's actually paid attention to what's going on. That's good. What's better is being funny. And unfortunately, to your point, and I saw that you tweeted this out, I think I either retweeted it or like that, I can't remember, that him without his writer's room, oh my gosh, the drop-off is immense. This is not a guy who can really just come up with stuff on the fly the way that Louis C.K. and Dave Chappelle and so many other great comedians who are currently active can do. And look, the truth here is that Greg Gutfeld is higher rated because he is funnier than the people who are on these main line old guard programs. And that's something that is an indictment of those programs because Greg's doing it with 10% of the amount of staff for his show that these guys are doing it. And for all these folks, they're just completely overpaid. They're completely overvalued. They do not actually represent the interests of the American people. And look, I think that one thing that's going to happen here is that people are going to start realizing that they can actually get much funnier comedians at a much lower cost, and that they're going to be able to do a lot more with the basis. Look, there's no doubt in my mind that John Mulaney could host his show better than Jon Stewart can host his show, better than Stephen Colbert can host the shows, better than Jimmy Kimmel can host a show. He could do that tomorrow. And that's because he's just a funnier person. And I think that look, I like these shows. I like Dick Cavett. I like, the old Johnny Carson stuff. I love these old interviews. I still watch old Conan interviews. I've said to you before. But part of the reason that you watch these things is because they're funny. And it's not just because of their ideology. I think that they're all, maybe not Carson, but they're all generally left of center. And it's one of these things where the fact that they don't appreciate that this is about a measure of humor as opposed to a measure of ideology is an indictment of their whole understanding of the role of late night in America.
Now, by the way, ideology doesn't disqualify you from being funny. I think the funniest show anywhere right now is Ruthless. And Ruthless is hilarious. And it's also extremely well informed by 4 veterans of the Hill who know what they're talking about. And so they can go from being very funny and talking about their parlay, which you should never play, Ben. Never play the Ruthless parlay. It's the worst parlay. I think it's the Bengals, the Colts, the Vikings, and the Panthers, right? It's the worst parlay ever. They only get worse if I ever guest hosted and they added the Browns. But but that's funny, right? They know everything, and they're smart. I just think the left is getting dumber and dumber, and it's that simple.
But see, I want to point out something, which is that Bill Burr is very funny. Dave Chappelle is very funny. Louis C.K. is very funny. All those guys are left of center. Maybe Nate Bargatze is a Republican. I don't know his politics exactly, but and Shane Gillis clearly leans more to the right. But the point is that it's not about your ideology. It's about you meeting us where we want you to meet us, which is making us laugh at the end of the day.
Did you see Shane at the end at the ESPYs?
Is the problem?
Was it Shane Gillis who did the ESPYs?
Yes.
That was hilarious.
Yeah.
And he didn't even say it. The line was implied.
Yeah. No, I mean the point is just get back to making us laugh. That's all we actually want from you. As we don't go to a rock, sort of performance to hear you lecture us about Gaza, and we don't go to a comedian performance to hear you lecture us about what we're doing wrong about COVID and why we need to wear a mask.
All right. Well, we're going to get to Gaza in the next segment. We got to get to Sydney Sweeney now. Mary Catherine Ham explained it for me. It's not my demo. I apparently had seen one movie that she had been in. She is gorgeous. I have looked it up.
You are a straight man. She's in your demo.
Well, I know, but I was unaware of her, and she is absolutely gorgeous. She's Farrah Fawcett for the 25s, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing. What Farrah Fawcett was to my generation, she's going to be for this generation of teenagers. Why did they do this to themselves?
The Democrats, I don't know why they keep stomping on themselves like this. They don't need to make these things political issues. They don't need to turn this into some kind of finding some Nazi dog whistle in a freaking ad. Just because the
jeans
ad is blonde and has blue eyes. I mean, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. And look, Clay Travis had, I think a good line about this, which is just about, Democrats declaring war on boobs. But one of the things that I think is clear that's going on here is they just get triggered by virtually everything that goes against their worldview about the way things ought to be. And there were a lot of ads and ad campaigns that ran in recent years that were about body positivity and things like that. And now the fact that, one organization has said, let's get back to something that is a little bit more akin to the kind of ads that we ran in the 80s and the like, that's something that's going to be good.
I know why an ex-person might post something to attract attention, but I'm going to talk with you in the break about this. The premise is some grifter on TikTok or X wants to attract attention, so they say something stupid. The question is, why does Good Morning America pick it up? That is
exactly. That's the
why.
Part.
Yeah. Okay. We'll talk about that during the break, as well as a couple other things like Russia, Russia, Russia. Don't go anywhere, America. I am back with Ben Domenech. Ben, did we learn? I saw there were stories about Russia, Russia, Russia. and new findings in the Durham Annex and all that. I really don't have time this week. I've got 7 grandkids here. Did we learn anything new? Are you stunned by it? You are a very good level about whether or not I should notice.
Look, I think that it's not so much that we learned huge new things. I think it's just that we confirmed things that we suspected, namely that those associated and very close to Hillary Clinton, including many of her supporters, donors, biggest supporters within politics, had significant roles to play within the way that the whole Russia thing played out. And look, I don't think there's a legal consequence to this, unfortunately. I think that this is a situation where, this is just going to have to stand as an indictment of the lies that we were told by so many people for so long. But the most important thing for me, in all of this, is that we don't let the Adam Schiffs of the world get away with gaslighting America anymore about the nature of what actually went on and the degree to which they lied to us about what was behind the scenes. To me, it's incumbent upon members of Congress and members of the cabinet to be honest to the American people, to be upfront about what is actually going on. And unfortunately, in this case, it looks like they lied to us repeatedly, and that they did so, having full conversations behind the scenes that were indicative of that willingness to
okay,
lie.
to that point, to that question,
Yeah.
What is going on? Why is Mike Waltz not confirmed? We're confirming like inspectors for OSHA right now, and we aren't confirming Mike Waltz when the UN is screwing up everything. What is going on?
I do not understand that either, Hugh, and it's something that I think is kind of hanging over this. We need to have him in that role as quickly as possible, and I think it's something that would be a profound help to America's role in leading the world and having a voice on the international stage that can condemn some of the things that are going on there. And look, I think this is a situation where the Senate has had to do essentially yeoman's work, pushing so many things through in a very quick manner. As many other people have commented, this is a presidency and an administration that has accomplished so much in a very short amount of time. I mean, there's really no comparison historically in terms of what
we're going to come back and talk about Gaza, and I think President Trump ought to call up John Thune and say, John, put Waltz on top of the list. I need him. We got our allies going south
agree.
on Gaza.
No, I agree, and I think that that's one of the reasons that we need to have a strong voice in that role. And look, I understand that it's mostly about messaging, but it's an important message to send, and that's why he needs to be top of the list.
I'm coming back with Ben to talk about Gaza and the choices Israel faces. Don't go anywhere, America. He'll be right back. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Van Domenech is my guest. We talked during the break why Michael Waltz ought to be immediately confirmed to the UN. It comes down to this. Donald Trump needs him as part of the team. Special Envoy Witkoff has done a great job. So has Ambassador Huckabee. Donald Trump has done a great job. But we're at a crossroads. Today they were in Rafah. Our allies are going south on us. England, France, Australia, Canada, they're all confused about Israel. Ben, what do you think the Jewish state does next, and why should they do it?
Well, I'll answer. Firstly, I want to say the announcement from Keir Starmer, from Macron, from Justin. At the
new guy, Mark, whatever his name is.
Sorry.
Carney.
In the entire Western frame, there should be no breaking with Israel at this particular moment, and the fact that they are doing it, I think, is both unacceptable and morally corrupt. And I do not. I wish that we had a loud voice out there calling them out on this, because I think that it's a betrayal of everything that they've said in the past, and really a craven attempt to play to the far left within all these different countries that have made this such a primary issue for their existence and advanced such propaganda as handed down by Hamas about what's actually going on over there. Secondly, I think the fact that they're doing this now makes Israel more emboldened in the sense that, okay, well, if you're going to do it this way, we really are standing alone, perhaps, with the support of America, but, not all of it. And we're going to have to stand up and make our case to continue to exist as a nation because we understand that this is an existential threat. And unfortunately, I think that that's going to result in the loss of a lot more human lives. But look, Hugh, we've been observing this so long. We kind of saw this coming, right? I mean, there were tendencies in this direction in the left in each of these nations, but to do it right now, the timing in particular, just seems to be the height of irresponsibility as a leadership class for all of these neoliberal, effectively, leaders. I guess Starmer, I don't know if you're going to call him that, but the point is, they are picking a time to go in this direction that could not be more damaging to the overall international cause of Israel, and that is catering to the people and the propagandists who have advanced this narrative that Israel does not have the right to pursue a military agenda that is in their interest.
President Trump said to do this is to reward Hamas, and he wasn't going to do it. I think he's right. And I think now Israel has clarity about who its friends are. And I think actually it's a crisis for the West because that's NATO plus Australia right there turning its back on a strategic ally of NATO and the United States. And I think it's a crisis for the West that will play out. But Haviv Rediger was on the program this week, and he said for the first time since 10/7, it is tragic. There are 20 human beings who are alive in the hellholes that Hamas has built, but we have to destroy Hamas. In other words, hostages come second. They're not equal. We have to destroy Hamas, which is, by the way, the Palestinians don't have a future if Hamas is left with 15,000 people in the tunnels, even if it's only 25% of the territory. Do you agree that Israel has to say hostages are beneath the destruction of Hamas right now?
Well, we talked last week about this a little bit, and I think that this is something that was going to have to come at a certain point, because Israel put those hostages obviously front and center, and it was natural and organic for people to elevate their importance in terms of trying to rescue them. But nation states have to make decisions that are about the future of the nation state, and I think that includes the willingness to go after and destroy the enemies of a country, even if it puts some of this at risk. It's very sad. I mean, Hugh, it's an absolute tragedy. But Hamas brought this on themselves, and they continue to bring it on themselves. They intended to bring it on themselves. And, look, I think that there has been such a shift in terms of the policy toward Israel, the attitude toward Israel in the last 2 years, that I think this is one where they have to take this moment at this opportunity that they have to actually end an existential threat to them, and I do not judge them for it.
All right, last question. Do you think it is possible that conservative free traders like me, because it's happening to me, I don't know if it's happening. I had Orrin Cass on yesterday. I've talked to Charles C.W. Cook and Matt Continetti and Noah Rothman about this, are going to come around to the idea that a baseline tariff is necessary because we protect the freedom of the seas and we're getting taken advantage of by the world?
Well, look, you know what I think about tariffs. I think they're stupid.
I know.
I think that they're a negotiating point in terms of an interaction with someone who you want to come to the table to open up their markets for free trade. Unfortunately, I think that you and I are on the short end of this at the current moment within the right. They certainly have embraced the tariff agenda as being one that they think works. I don't know that it's going to work long term. It has proved less damaging than a lot of us expected in the short term. But I do think that one of the things that is true is that there are a lot of nations that were taking advantage of our situation, taking advantage of our marketplace, and the president understands that. And this was his weapon to use, a very blunt instrument, unfortunately.
Well, this is he's pushing me to. He's right. I didn't know Japan didn't take our rice. I didn't know the UK and EU wouldn't take our beef.
Yep.
And moreover, we protect the freedom of the seas. And they don't meet their 2%. Now they're not going to meet their 5% in NATO, and now they're turning against Israel. maybe it's time to lay a tax on these people. And I know the argument that we end up paying it ourselves. I just don't buy it because we have the market dominance.
Yeah, I think we have the market dominance, and I think that Americans are actually willing to bear some of those prices, just given the context of the world as it is today. But one thing that I do think is very critical here is the president has made these repeated bets and trying to handle so many different deals all at once, making them all work, is going to be a very high stakes game, and we have no guarantee that it's going to work out.
How much capacity do you think Scott Bessent has as well as the president? Because I think he's pretty doggone smart.
He's got to be on constant high-test Red Bull, my friend. Like not the kind they sell in your 7-Eleven, the stuff you get from overseas that has twice as much caffeine.
I'm very impressed by him, though. I had never heard of him. Literally never heard of him, and he is so smart.
Yes, he is. And I think he's doing as good of a job as he can in the current role. We'll see how long he stays in it. Otherwise, I think the latest job numbers revisions could have Jerome Powell headed to the exits.
Oh my goodness, he better. It's too late. Might be the best nickname yet. Ben Domenech, thank you so much. Listen to the Big Ben podcast. Like and subscribe. I may miss it for a couple of weeks while I'm on granddaughter and grandson duty.
I forgive you. I forgive you, Hugh.
But I will listen. I will catch up. And in the meantime, follow him on X at B Domenech. Read him in The Spectator. See him on Fox News.